Good evening and welcome to the Monday, February 28th Muscatine School Board of Education meeting work session. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine the quorum, please?
Sure. Director Connard?
Here.
Cooney? Here. DeBeat?
Here.
LaRue?
Here.
Morgan?
Here.
Phillips? Sure. Quorum is present.
Thank you. Can you please join me with the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the Thank you. I would like to welcome visitors and media representative tonight. We start with our work-based learning update, and with that we have Mr. Brandon Welch, please.
First of all, thank you for hearing us out. I'm here today representing our work-based learning program, which you've heard a little bit about from me previously, and our work experience program in conjunction with Marcus Holler as well over at Muscatine High School. We've done a lot of legwork into this and working with the Community Foundation of Greater Muscatine with Tom Anderson. And Tom, you can correct me if I misspeak anywhere here, along with some other schools in the district and some other members of our district staff as well. I believe attached to the agenda is an agreement with the Community Foundation of Greater Muscatine, and that is to establish an account for work-based learning funds, along with future funds that we hope to fundraise, and also to transfer existing funds which were earmarked for special education in the amount of $7,000 to $8,000, which is currently in our general fund. Again, these were originally earmarked for the work experience program for the special education work experience program, and they were granted from the Muscatine Charities in the United Way. So the purpose of this is to fund all work-based learning activities, which could include site visits, tours, things like this. But I think the reason we're here tonight is for the portion that involves payment of students in those work experience situations. And in most cases, this is going to pertain to special education funding. In the past, those funds that I previously mentioned were available for our special education department to distribute as stipends for goals reached or for hours worked for those special ed students who maybe weren't getting paid by the company. Again, any future references, if a company is paying the student, this will not pertain to these funds here. They'll be handled by the employer. But in the past, they were able to distribute those. Once the funds were moved into the Muscatine Education General Fund, it became illegal to pay students out of that fund. So by moving them to the Community Foundation of Greater Muscatine and offering them as a stipend, we've worked with their legal assistant as well, and we will be able to pay them based upon goals. Again, I don't see this happening very often with Gen Ed, but I do see it as an equity issue because most of our Gen Ed students that are doing a work-based learning program are going to be students will. However, a lot of the special ed students will be working for the benefit of themselves versus the company, in which they may not get paid. So we'd like to offer them some type of stipend. We also see that as a positive because we can take that with their supervisors and teachers at school to also learn about checking accounts and depositing and direct deposit and managing money as well too while at school. I do see a few examples where Gen Ed students may receive some funds, and I've talked to a lot of districts. There are districts that are paying all students in the work experience program, and we can talk about that if you have questions. But I do see an example of a Gen Ed student where we can maybe supplement to get them to move into a career of their choice versus a part-time job. So for instance, if they wanted to be a welder and they're currently making $15 working at a fast food chain, and I can get them on as a welder and gain some experience, but they're only willing to pay $10 perhaps we could offset that to get them to go towards the career of their choice versus a job that they need that extra $5 for. It's been great working with the foundation. They'll have an opportunity to promote those funds to potential givers. And I believe we will have some corporate support to help fund and add to those funds. In conversation with Mr. Holler, because they were originally earmarked for special ed, those original funds that we would hope to transfer over would go towards special education first, and any additional funds would be split jointly between the work-based learning program and the work experience program. We're still working on promoting employers paying students, which would eliminate the need for any of these funds. And we're still working out a tiered system and a cap for how much we would be able to pay students based upon what jobs they're doing, but we want to make that equitable upon all students. And we've also talked about a probationary period where they're showing that they're doing what they need to do at their job before we kick in the pay system as well. So again, this would be a stipend based upon mostly goals, not just pure hours at the job site. So Tom, I'm not sure if I'm missing anything there, or if I have it covered.
So how does the board fit into this? And I would just draw your attention to Schedule B in the agreement. So basically the board will be acting as an agent. So an agency fund would be set up. So the Community Foundation of Greater Muscatine and Brandon and his department, they keep track of everything through a computerized system, similar to our partnership we have with the Foundation on Scholarships. So then I think the third, well, all of Schedule B really pertains to the meat and potatoes of this thing and how the board is involved, which I said is we're acting as an agent to pass through the dollars that are kept at the Community Foundation to give to the students. So, and just like the Community Foundation and our partnership with the scholarships, there is a fee. So the Community Foundation would be charging a fee according to their schedule. It's a nominal fee that would have to be paid, but it's better. I mean, this is a better way of running this program, I guess, than the way it was before. So.
And I know that the information you gave was more about the funding part of it, but I heard you mention that something about even showing the kids how to balance a checkbook and such.
Yeah.
Does that also include like any other parameters, like how to get their first apartment and stuff like that? Or is it just about that base?
To some of those kids, especially in the special education department, have probably never had a checking account. So establishing that, learning how to go cash a check, how to direct deposit, how that comes out, I think adds another facet to their work experience program.
Thank you.
Brandon, do you know how many kids are currently in the work-based learning program at the high school?
So work-based learning overall is we're probably up to about 65, 70 right now. You probably have roughly 20 this year that are in work experience through our special ed department. I don't foresee many of the gen ed students utilizing these funds, and Mr. Holler is making a push to try to get companies, and is making some progress in getting companies to pay our special ed students as well. So only on those places where they're working, meeting goals, doing what they're supposed to do, and not getting paid would this apply.
Is the work experience program still a 2-year program? Because it kind of started out that it was a smaller group and you had part of your time in the class and part of it was even jobs on campus or slightly off campus. And then as you got more adept at working, you took on a bigger role and sometimes you were off campus for 2 hours.
Yep.
Or a half a day even.
So there's a class freshman year, forget what it's called. Second year is usually EBCE, which is a skill prep, and then their last 2 years, if they follow that pattern, is work experience. So that's usually 2 to 3 hours a day, depending on the location and the student.
I have a couple questions. Number one, with Tom, you said they will be charging us minimum fee. Are they charging minimum fee per student, or is there a fee for like lump sum?
I
With-
believe it's a percentage of whatever funds they're holding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually a percentage of the expense. That's what I've seen on other funds through them. A percentage of an expense, whatever
And I
the
think-
expense out, they charge a percent for
I
that.
think if I recall, it's 1%. If we would have done it a little bit differently, it was a 10% charge, so this way would be I believe the 1%.
My second question with the Schedule B, it's almost in the middle, where it says students participating in the program may receive a stipend up to, and do we have any idea what would be the range?
Yet to be
That's-
determined. I will tell you, other districts that we've talked to have done a probationary period of 20. This is for all students, not just
Yes.
special ed in their district, but I kind of like their format of 20 hours probationary, so that would be free. They're not getting paid during that time. Their next 100 hours at this district is $10 an hour for the next 100 hours. And at that time, their hope is that the employer will take them on as their employee.
Thank you.
You run yourself out of jobs if you do that.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So if you continue to place kids, do you run out of job opportunities in the future? Are you worried about that yet?
Because of the payment system, or?
Well, you're saying that after 100 hours, say we're hoping that the employer or wherever they're working takes them on. Well, they have a limited number of employees that they need.
Yeah, I think it would still be through a limited time because they're still going to be earning credit through the high school program. So I think we're still only talking 2 to 3 hours during the school year. If you're speaking like post-secondary, they take them on. It's probably a good problem to have once we get there, but that would probably be up to me and Marcus to find more opportunities if that happens.
Any other question?
Just for reference to, at our next meeting, which is next Monday, there'll be an item approving this agreement for you, as well as a approval to transfer the funds. So those two items will be on.
Is that going to be funded every year then? We're going to transfer funds every year?
So that's just because right now the district has those 7,000.
Right.
Whatever. We will transfer that to the foundation. After that, it's all charitable donations to the foundation that will fund the program.
Thank you.
Any other question? Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you. Our next item is 2022-23 budget discussion with Tom Anderson.
Yes,
Thank
hello
you.
again. Okay, so everybody should have had a handout of this presentation, and then we're also projecting it here for the audience. So tonight, we have an agenda related to ESSER. We're going to review some ESSER expenditures, and we're going to talk about the management and capital projects funds, which are both property tax funds. We're also going to review our general fund impact, a new money, budget guarantee, and funding. We'll have our proposed levies for 22-23. We'll talk about the budget hearing time and date, the budget guarantee resolution. Then we'll talk about a couple of those financial indicators, our unspent authorized budget and our solvency ratio, cash versus UAB, and then just finish up with some reminders of some expiring levies and revenue purpose statement. So first of all, I want to go back to fiscal 20 and 21 to review what I'm calling here ESSER 1 summary. This is on page 3. And so you can see there how we utilized that first round of dollars from the federal government. And then on the right-hand side, where it says gear, that's was all related to technology. So any questions on any of this information? This is just the public school portion. You know, if you went out to the Department of Ed website and pulled off what our allocations are, this first round also included non-public school, but I'm only including the public portion here. So page 4. Okay, so this is our SR2 and SR3 allocations. And then also of our SR3, we have to set aside some for learning loss. So several times the directors have met to go over, you know, these allocations, and we kind of, all of these categories are what our district will be utilizing ESSER funds for. And, you know, I'll just point out that it's not set in stone, but, you know, there's things such as some additional school year support and interventionists that if we can find staffing to provide some of this intervention and or school year additional support, the intent is certainly to hire some temporary staffing. I would have you put an asterisk by the categories that we are that we have employed, that we're using to pay, I guess, staff. So the health para at the high school. Again, there's the interventionists that are to be hired yet or filled. There's the nurse contracted service. We do contract with Unity Point for a nurse. We also started our sharing agreement with a career guidance counselor with MCC. And then the social emotional support positions, we do have 6 this year that we're funding out of ESSER dollars with, I believe the intent is to hire another one next year. And then, so those are the ones where, you know, we continue to monitor it every year, and as we get closer to the end of the resource here, then obviously some decisions are going to have to be made. So, you know, obviously the upgrades to ventilation is on this list, and then if you have a question about the administrative costs indirect, that's for all federal programs. You know, a district can charge a percentage, a small percentage of administrative costs. So let's just say the time and effort that it's taking other people to more money. It's just, so it's not extra pay. It's just a way to recoup some costs that we are going to be incurring. So then page 5, this document here just shows our total budget for ESSER2, the 3.9 million. ESSER3 is 8.8. And again, we have to set aside 20% of that for learning loss, and that's the 1.76 million. So going left to right, FY21 through FY25, those are our estimates right now on when we will expend ESSER 2 and 3. You know, there isn't, ESSER 3 ends in the federal fiscal year end of September 30th of 24. So we just have to be cognizant of that. Once we get to the end of our fiscal year of June 30th of 24, we still have July, August, and September, or July and August to spend, July, August, and September, excuse me, to spend ESSER 3. So that just provides, you know, I'm sure summer school is an example of an expenditure we'll have in FY24 and 25 there. So All right, so next I'm going to move on to something we started here July 1st, and that is self-funding insurance, self-funding health insurance. So we started July of 21, and right now we can give, every month you are getting basically a treasurer's report of Fund 71, which is our self-funding insurance. So you can kind of see the deposits that are being made, the expenditures that are incurring on a monthly basis. So this is just a kind of a summary of our total expenditures through January. And you can see there the total claims have been 2.4 million. If you look right above that, you can see stop loss reimbursements. So that just means the reimbursements we've received because of that stop loss that we had on our insurance of $75,000. And then my understanding is we will begin receiving rebates from pharmacies. So that's why that's zero right now. But so you can see there, the second green line there, the claim/fixed costs per employee per month. PEPM is per enrolled employee per month. So I would think of that as, a contract with anybody that's on our insurance. So whether they're an early retiree or on COBRA. So that fixed cost per employee per month, that's where that first asterisk is, and that's $939.44. So I would say that that's below what we are funding or what we are budgeting for. That's the very last asterisk on that page. $1,030.43 per employee per month is what we are basically funding or had budgeted for. So we're still below, through January, that amount. And then also, it's important to know the carrier projected claims and then some specific stop loss deductible information there. So any questions on this page?
Is there any family insurance? I mean, so this is, when you say that it's a cost per enrolled employee,
Right.
how does family play into that?
It's all considered one. Yeah. Yep. So that accumulated lives, just if you think of it, let's just say in July we had 450 contracts. In August we had 460. In September we had 455. It's just continually adding those up. So it's not a per member per month. It's a per employee. Okay. So page 7, we're going to look at a couple different things here. The titles in gray are the current plan year. The titles in purple are proposed for 22-23. So there's that budgeted amount of $1,030. And then our funded costs, or if you multiply, like when, as of now, we have 460 contracts. When we did this budget last year about this time, we had about 474. So that's what we were using back then. So I just want to make sure that we're using a different number, because obviously that the enrollment fluctuates month to month. And so now we're talking about last year to this year. So Holmes Murphy helped reforecast the remaining 5 months of this year. And obviously I don't get into a lot of details on that because they use a lot of information to come up with this reforecast. And so right now, the reforecast is our claims should come in at 5.4 million. And again, we're still ahead of what we're funding for the remaining fiscal year, so by $210. So talking about next year, we're looking at a 5.4% increase. And again, that's based on Holmes Murphy's assistance with projecting, well, we got our renewal from Wellmark. We have different pieces of our administrative. There's an administrative cost, there's a stop loss premium cost, there's an aggregate premium cost, and so forth. So we're looking at increase of 5.4%, and that would mean that budget level of $5.9 million based on 458 contracts, which is what we had, I believe, in January. So you can see our rates over there on the right, what we currently charge for health insurance for our 3 different plan types, for our single contract, single plus one, and family, and then applying that 5.4% increase to our rates. So
I'll just add a few pieces in here, Tom, if that's okay. And so when we look at that increase of 5.4%, as Tom mentioned, there's 2 pieces that are factored into that. One, they're projecting an increase in claims next year. We're seeing that across, all of their customers and insurance rates, just kind of across the board. Claims are going to go up. So that's part of that increase, and then also increased in our fixed costs, and that's due to the stop loss insurance and a few other pieces going up. But in general, as we look at this, and just for some perspective, what we're seeing across, I talk to other superintendents, when you talk to Holmes Murphy about what's happening across their entire client base, it's 8 to 10% increases across the board. So one of the things that we looked at in terms of should we go self-insured or stay fully insured, ultimately it puts us in a little bit more control. So when we see that we're going to pay the increased claims if they actualize the way we project them to. And the other increase on fixed costs is on that stop loss. So we saw was about $150,000 increase on our stop loss insurance. If we would have stayed fully insured and we'd have seen that 8 to 10% increase on a $5+ million fully insured, we would have seen a much larger increase to all of our members. So again, it's just important to keep all those pieces in mind and so far this has been good for us. So this was a good decision that we did this when we did. And again, it helps put us a little bit more in the driver's seat of how we manage those cost increases to all of our employees in the district.
all right, moving on. Page 8. So I'm just going to touch briefly on dental and the recommendation to move towards self-funding of dental. It's not near as complex as the health insurance would be or was. And just like we were seeing in our claims experience with Wellmark, we see the same thing with Delta Dental of Iowa. And so at the top of this first page 8 is just a summary of our dental. It's not super complicated. There's just a maximum benefit. So it's not like there would be a stop loss or anything like that involved with dental. There's a maximum benefit. There always has been. So that's not changing. Our dental plan would not change. It's just that we're going to propose moving from the fully insured to self-funding. If you look at that middle section there, you can see on the far right the census, how many single contracts, how many family contracts we have. That current column is our current rates right now, what we pay. the 3106 per month and the 10148. Wellmark's fully insured, or I'm sorry, Delta Dental's fully insured renewal to us was a 2% increase. And so what we would be looking at is kind of that self-funded alternate where, you know, we pay one fixed cost for administrative fee, one fixed cost for administrative fee, so $7.21, no matter what, if it's family or single contract. And then you can, you know, they've broken out our claims based on our past claims experience. So we would be proposing to just hold our rate steady, because you can see there, if you add up the 721 and the 2566 and so forth, we would, based on keeping our claims the same, going self-funding, we would be basically putting in $303,000, and you can see there on the bottom is the past 2 years claims experience. This current year that we're in, which is annualized, and then the last year was $290,000. So there's some room to, I guess, kind of do the same thing that we've been doing with health insurance, to do this for dental insurance as well. So we would just keep a separate internal service fund, just like we do with health insurance, and run it. It's basically the same thing. We would be putting into that self-insurance fund, or dental self-insurance monthly, and then we would be paying Delta Dental the claims.
Do we know when we're looking to need that finalized?
Well, we would, we're looking at a July 1st renewal, so we would be looking to finalize this at the April board meeting.
Gotcha.
And I would just reiterate about how, you know, this process has been so much more simpler than the, you know, going to health insurance. Obviously, that you're talking about a much bigger liability, but again, I feel comfortable with proposing us going towards self-funded for dental. So. All right. I'm hitting the wrong. Okay. Now, we're going to start talking about some property tax funds. The first one is going to be our management fund. All right, this is Fund 22 that you see on your monthly board report, the financials, and you know, there's only certain things we can pay out of the management fund, but whatever our need is, you know, we can ask, or we need to pay it with property tax, I guess. And so I've kind of just summarized here those major things that we are paying with this management fund. Obviously, the one thing is early retirement packages. So $449,000 is the amount that we'll be paying out for early retirees that have retired prior to this year. Obviously, you know, typically that is a 5-year payout. So this is the second year for the people that just retired last year. It's the third year for people that retired 2 years ago. So this liability is going down. If you want to if you look at I think I pointed this out in our audit report, it does show what our, you know, liability is going forward. Obviously, in 4 years from now, if we never offer another early retirement package, we wouldn't have to fund this with property tax. So that's kind of how that works. So another insurance premium that we pay is our work comp out of management fund. Property casualty, so work comp right now is with SFM Insurance. Our property casualty, the majority of that is with EMC Insurance Company, that safety group insurance through IASB that a number of districts across Iowa are in. Gallagher is our agent, local agent here in town. So that also includes, you know, our liability, our, you know, our vehicle fleet insurance falls under that. Then there's the local government risk pool, and that's natural gas insurance. So a couple of years ago, we moved to basically through ISFIS. I'm sure that might be familiar to you, the Iowa School Finance Information Service with Larry Siegel. They have a local government risk pool. Right now, natural gas is the only thing in that risk pool. So basically, we moved our general fund expense for natural gas into an insurance, basically for in the management fund. It's a legal expenditure out of the management fund, so that is one thing that we will be approving again at the next board meeting, because every year we bring that to the board to approve, but that is one expenditure. Another one is going to be our unemployment claims and or deductibles on our insurance claim, on our property casualty insurance claims that we do have. We can take our deductible out of the management fund. I would say unemployment is not a huge expenditure that we have in our district, but that is something that we would pay out of the management fund. So most of these premiums, as I've told boards in the past, these are paid in July, so we just need to make sure that we have the cash flow to pay that in July. So a lot of times what I will do is I'll look forward 2 and 3 years just to make sure that you know, we're going to have that cash flow in the management fund. So all right, so the next page, I know why it was backwards, because I had it upside down. So the other property tax fund is physical plant and equipment levy. I've kind of lumped this in with our SAVE. So this is Fund 33, which is SAVE, and Fund 36, which is capital projects. Our SAVE revenues are approximately $5.2 million. That's that statewide, or that's the sales tax. And then we get a per pupil allocation from the Department of Revenue, and our estimated revenue for next year is $5.2 million. And then there's the physical plant and equipment levy. Those revenues are $2.4 million, and those come from two sources: our board approved levy and then our voter approved levy. And we do have an annual budget coming out of our capital projects funds that we budget for. Again, that list is in front of you: vehicles and buses, our facility maintenance. So non-instructional software, that's something that we can take out of capital projects, and so that budget is around $325. So that's going to be things such as our finance software or our student information service software. Anything that is not, any software that is not used in the classroom, instructional purposes, can be taken out of capital projects. Technology, I got an asterisk by that number, and that's because over the next several years, we'll be using ESSER dollars for that technology upgrades and or rotations that we have. So there's a copier lease, basically our print management system lease comes out of capital projects, and that's throughout the whole district. And then there's some building leases for the Ag Learning Center, and then that building at Madison that is a portable unit there. So around 2.4 to 3 million is what, you know, I guess you could say comes off the top every year. And not that I want to overwhelm you with financial information, but I did provide a cash flow projection that I get from our friends at Piper Sandler. And it's just a one page, just goes on for 2 or 3 pages. I only provided the first page because I wanted you to see that our rationale for, knowing what our cash situation is in capital projects, continually monitoring it based on the projects that we have. So we do things such as, looking at left to right, you're going to see some dates of payments and collections, and then, sales tax revenue that we get. The voter PEPAL and board PEPAL comes to us twice a year. And then we look at, looking towards the top there's those things off the top that I was just talking about. We take those off here starting in June, July. We want to get those, we take those off our cash flow. And then after that, there's just what's left, those other bigger projects that we have that are left. So such as, HVAC, those updates, they come out of capital projects, but that's reimbursed to us through ESSER. So that's why I have that asterisk on there of 1.4 million. That's basically a reimbursement back to capital projects, but we have to pay for that ahead of time. That's one of those federal grants where you have to expend the money first and then you apply to get reimbursement. So those other fun colored boxes are those other projects that we have going on for the Student Center. And then we do have some of the Centralized Kitchen because we've started that architect engineering costs for that, but you can see what I say this shows to me and to the directors is that, we have that resource for the Centralized Kitchen. That's the next biggest project that we have out there. So we should be, I guess, in good shape for that project. Any questions on that page? All right. Now we're going to move into our general fund, okay? So this document, you all have access to this. It's not anything new. It's off of IASB's website, but I feel like it's a good way to show you a few things. Number one, I'd point out to what I've circled in the kind of the middle on the left, which is new money. You hear that term a lot. Well, if you remember, our general fund has the concept of spending authority. So technically, I would call that new spending authority or new authority, or maybe it's negative authority. So at the top in green, these are projections that I've used for enrollment. FY23 actually is our budgeted enrollment for the fiscal year 23, 4604.5. And then going forward the next 4 years, I've kind of, I don't want to say use my own projection, but I guess it kind of is, but it's simply taking, this year's second graders, our next year's third graders, our next year's the next year's fourth graders, and so on. I use an average of kindergarten enrollment, so it's probably a conservative estimate, but, I don't like the Department of Ed's enrollment projections because, I think it was a lot more steeper. So I'm not sure, enrollment obviously is that one unknown that we have that we always are thinking about in the fall. So I've used 2%, this year's SSA was 2.5. I used 2% going forward. We could change that to 0 if we wanted, or 1 or whatever, but I think, gosh, that's one of those things, again, that you just never know from year to year when the legislative season starts, and, that's always kind of at the top of the list. So we all know that kind of got settled here just recently. So it's not too often where we can present information for our budgets and the legislature hasn't decided. That's definitely happened before in the past too. So You can see that other green line where there's all zeros, you know, if you look in the gray part under FY23, that's that $5 per pupil where the legislature, you know, if you're familiar with this, you know, there's a state cost per pupil, and then there's a whole bunch of, I don't know how many. There's several districts that are above that for whatever reason, you know, going back to the probably 60s when they came up with this method, their cost per pupil was higher. So what the legislature is trying to do is just kind of narrow that gap. And so I don't know how many years, it'll probably be way beyond my time here that they'll reach that level, but it's progress, I guess.
I think
So,
they're supposed to break even in 30 years.
is it
to be
30?
honest.
It'll be after
It
my
might be
time.
down to about 20 years now,
Okay.
but we'll get caught up where we're
Okay.
all getting the same for all of the Iowa kids in about 20 years.
Yeah. So there you have 7,413 per pupil. So if you remember that formula, that regular program district cost formula, is that our enrollment times that dollar amount. So if you look in that lighter pink boxes at the bottom, this is how we generate our regular program district cost, and then with our adjustment for budget guarantee. And because they added that $5 per pupil, our budget guarantee did go down a few $1,000. So we're right at that 100,418. And if you remember, we get that 101% guarantee of the prior year regular program district cost. So that's how they calculated that. And I have a slide on the next page to show that. But so what is this saying? This is saying that for our regular program district costs, we're getting $19,000 less next year than we are getting this year. And if you project out, you can see, you know, obviously we're using projections for enrollment. We're using estimates for SSA, how important that SSA amount is. Now, this is going to be one of those years where we're going to probably utilize our unspent authorized budget that we've been that we can accumulate. So you know, we've done all the right things in the past. I believe in Muscatine, we've right-sized our district as far as staffing goes. You know, just 5 years ago, we were at 419 FTE for teachers in fiscal 18. Right now in fiscal 22, we're sitting at 381 and a half. So, you know, we have managed to get through these difficult times with we haven't laid off staff. We've managed our staffing levels by attrition and not replace people when we don't need to. And we've, you know, the people that we are replacing, obviously there's that cost. You know, a newer teacher obviously is cost less than a teacher maybe that's retiring. So. Yeah.
My understanding is, and yes, I know the 2.5 was decided on, but if they would have actually given more of a percentage, in the end, we would not have been going almost $20,000 less
Right.
from last year.
It would have had to been, I believe, right under 3% before we kind of
Yeah.
bridged that. So it would have had to
Right.
been more than like 2.8. Is that what I told you? 2.8, 2.9%.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this doesn't
Right.
account for any inflation, so
Right.
we lose on
Right.
both sides.
Yeah.
So, yeah. When we get to one of the next slides, I'll kind of hit on expenditures. So, all right. Like I said, the next slide does kind of break down that budget guarantee. I don't know that I need to go into it in detail, but if you look at that middle column, and then you see FY22 on the left, FY23 on the right, and you know we should get 100. We're always guaranteed 101% of the prior year's regular program district cost, and that's how we came up with the 100,417. And then we are going to be putting on the agenda, recommending for approval that every board has to approve the budget guarantee resolution. So that is going to be on our agenda for March. Yeah, the next March board meeting, March 7th. And so there's the language of our budget guarantee. And if you remember from School Finance 101 that I know some of you went to, and maybe others went to a higher level, but we don't, it's not recommended to ever give up spending authority. Doesn't mean you're going to spend it, but once you use it, you lose it, or once if you don't approve it tonight, there's no way we're ever going to get it back. So,
Tom,
yeah.
to make up I'll just roughly say $20,000, we have the authority to try to recoup that with property tax. Is that correct or not?
The budget guarantee amount, yeah, the $100,000.
So we can,
yes.
all right.
Not the 19,000.
So the $100,000
Right,
is what,
right.
So
And I'm going to
that's-
show that on my next slide.
Sorry.
That's okay. The next slide is one that you returning board members have seen. This is just a comparison of, on the far right-hand side is our proposed levies for 22-23. So, the top part is our general fund levy. You're going to see it is the general fund piece is, well, overall, I should say, I'll just point out what's highlighted. Our overall rate is going to go down by 9 cents per thousand. So our asking will go down by 91,000 in property tax. So there's a lot of things that go into that. Obviously, one of them is enrollment, but another piece of that is all of the property tax. How do I word this? Property tax reduction incentives that the legislatures approve. So that's another reason. There's a lot of formulas in our aid and levy worksheet that we get. Some and a lot of them have to do with how much revenue is generated from sales tax, and that goes back to the property taxpayers to reduce property taxes and such. So it's a combination of those things. So our general fund levy is made up of our budget guarantee, the $100,417, assuming that gets approved next week. You can see how much property tax, the property tax implications of that are. Our at risk, which we did approve that, I believe in January, the $1,098,000, and you can see the property tax implications for that. So I would have you point out that instructional support levy. Okay, that's the property tax portion is $1.9 million. So on the far left, you can see that I've put in purple there. So part of that instructional support levy is funded through an income surtax. So the income surtax rate we're going to be setting for calendar year 22, and that's 1%. That's what it's always been. And we're required to have at least 1% of income surtax to fund our instructional support levy, and that's according to our the resolution that was approved not too long ago. And there is a, I put up there 10% ISL, so that means 10% of our regular program district cost. Well, if you add up property taxes of $1.9 million, income surtax right now is estimated to be $297,000. That adds up to about $2.2 million. Well, on the prior slides, you saw that our regular program district cost is 34 point some million. So take that times 10%, that's like 3 point something million. The reason that we don't actually get 10% is because the state is supposed to fund part of every district's instructional support levy with state aid. And that has not happened since I've started. Well, I should say 20 years ago, when I started in this business, the state did put in a portion of state aid to fund districts' instructional support levy, but I bet it wasn't not too long after that where the legislature just says, we're not doing that. That's one of those things they don't do. We also don't get the authority like we do, like instructional support increases our spending authority, but not the 3.4 million, not what it could be, only what is funded. So then you can see there our management fund levy. We're not going to change it next year. It's still going to be the $1 million. And you can see the property taxes implications on that. And then the last levy is our board PEPL of 33 cents that the board has authority to approve every year without a vote. And then you have your voter approved PEPL that is, we can approve up to a maximum of that $1.34. So we will set, on March 7th, we'll set our public hearing date, time, and place to be on April 11th. So we'll set the public hearing time, date, and place on March 7th, and our public hearing will be on April 11th. Budgets have to be certified to the county auditors by the 15th, so it's perfect timing. We can do that on the 11th. And any questions on the proposed? No, there's only a maximum amount that we can tax for, obviously. So we're, management fund, we could tax more, but we don't need to. Obviously, we tax for what we need. And then general fund, there's just a maximum, and obviously PEPL, there's a maximum. So,
Tom,
yeah.
not remembering exactly what it is, but isn't there one of them that is expiring? in a
Yeah, I'm
couple
going to
years?
talk about that at the end. I have a summary there. Okay, so a couple more slides. This is our the last few slides here are our financial indicators. So the first one here is our unspent budget authority. Okay. And so I've actually FY21 is probably more not like estimated, but it's pretty close. It's never final until the Department of Management says it's final. So I still have the estimate for FY21 in there. But so if you see our unspent authorized budget, it's that remaining legal spending authority at the end of a fiscal year. Maintaining adequate unspent budget authority provides legal authority to spend the unassigned fund balance. So there's the calculation. You can see our recommended goal range is 5 to 15%. So we're above the 15. So and you can see for FY20, because we don't have FY21 on a statewide, you can see where we fall. We're right below average compared to other districts, but our maximum spending authority, well, there's a lot of things, and the next slide will go over into what goes into that maximum spending, because we were just talking about regular program district costs. That's built into this number. But there's other things that are built in, such as miscellaneous income, the carryover from year to year, because obviously unspent authorized budget gets carried over from year to year. Whatever it ends at the end of FY21, that 12.8 million got carried over to the current year that we're in.
So Tom, are you saying that there are some school districts in Iowa that has almost 60%?
Yeah, that's what that says.
Oh, that's
Yes,
amazing.
That is amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Spend it fast. No.
It's becoming
I don't know. It might be a K-8 district somewhere. I don't know what district it is, but yeah, that's. All right, so I'm going to go to the next slide. And again, I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of numbers, but I did need to include this page So that blue line is just a sum of a lot of formula-driven numbers. And then line 15, that's our dropout prevention. And then everything in the next section, everything in yellow is, you know, those amounts that we have overspent that we get additional authority for, and those are basically confirmed, those are set. The ones in gray are still estimated amounts. So I'm still estimating, you know, there's two parts to that LEP. One of them we just approved in what, probably November, December. That was that 132,326. That's the authority we were asking for LEP instruction beyond 5 years. And then the other piece was open enrollment, or basically open enrollment out. You know, we can generate authority if our enrollment ever increases, so someday we will have that. But for now, we've been increasing our authority for the students that are not on the prior year's open enrollment that are on the current year, and so we have to send those districts that money, so we're asking for that authority to send those districts that tuition. So those in yellow are already confirmed. The ones in gray, we're still estimating. Now, I estimated lower on the LEP allowable costs, and then I basically projected it forward for FY23. And the same with special ed deficit. I kept the deficit though at the same, even though, you know, if it ends up being more, then that means our authority goes up. If it ends up going down, then, you know, that's that much less in expenditure. So I just need to we need to make sure we account for something there. So then on working our way
Tom?
down, oh yeah.
I'm sorry, I apologize. On that special ed, that's almost twice the amount with the 726 and then
Right.
down to 488?
So, yeah, you know, I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I guess that's a sign that we didn't overspend our special ed, right? In FY21 compared to FY20. So that's what that means.
Yeah, so
You know,
for some reason we really did there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's those two areas that if we overspend, we can ask for that authority after the
Yes.
fact. One of them is LEP, also known as ESL, English language learners.
Mhm.
So, and then the other one is special education, but anything else, yeah. So then if I look down, you know, that line 25, our maximum district cost, but then there's two more lines down from that. One of them is our preschool foundation aid, and then that instructional support authority that we get that I was just talking about. So that gets to our subtotal of $553 million for next year, $52 million estimated for this year. Then there's that miscellaneous income, and that's one thing that generates spending authority, but generally miscellaneous income comes to us and there's an actual expenditure that has to go out for that, such as federal money. All federal money is miscellaneous income, but there's going to be an expenditure behind that. It's not like it's in the good old days when we got, you know, well, not so much here, but, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in interest income was miscellaneous income that we could spend. We could fund a teacher or two on the miscellaneous income that a district got. But so those federal programs, there's some state money that is miscellaneous income. So that we have to estimate. And obviously you see in FY21, that estimate went up to about 5 million because of ESSER. I'm projecting it this year to be 7.3, but depending on, you know, when other federal ESSER money hits, that's what's really making this hard to, it's going to fluctuate. It's not going to be, this isn't exact, but So you can see our maximum authorized budget is at 72 million, and then our estimated expenditures right now are 59 roughly million dollars. So that's obviously an estimate. So this document is used, you know, it's never set right now. I mean, it's a continuous project to, you know, make sure that we're spending. Ideally, it's ideal to spend the authority that's generated this year on this year's students. You know, if we're seeing millions of dollars of increase from last year, a carryover increase. Last year, I think a combination of many things such as ESSER money and then not being able to find staffing to fill some positions affected our unspent authorized budget or carryover last year. So tough concept. I know I tried to actually reduce this slide from a different slide with a lot of numbers on it, but any questions on that one? So that second financial indicator is that solvency ratio. So this is just a snapshot point in time measure of our revenue remaining, assuming the district closed their doors on June 30th of a fiscal year end, after gathering all of our year's revenue and paying all of our obligations. So the calculation is our unassigned and assigned general fund balance divided by our revenues minus our AEA flow through. The 5 to 15%, again, is that recommended range. You can see we've been as high as 24%. And, you know, we are kind of on that downhill trend, but I would say the main reason for that is, you know, there's a statutory limit on what we can levy for a cash reserve levy. And we were at that statutory limit for several years. But we continued to overspend special education, overspend ESL. So we're using cash to, and we're overspending ESL and special ed and using that cash. We have the we have the authority to do that, but we need cash to do that. That makes sense. And so, you know, that's why our solvency ratio has dipped somewhat. Now we did put in a cash reserve for next year. I believe it is the maximum amount that we can get, but you can see on this slide or on the right-hand side where it's showing what is our UAB compared to what our cash is at the end of the year. So basically I want to say our cash on hand, we want to add all those receivables, we want to subtract all those payables, and that's the amount of cash we would end up with, $11 million in FY21. Our UAB was like 12.8. So I'm not saying wherever we would spend that 12.8 in 1 year, but if we did, we wouldn't have the cash to do that, right? So, and I've been in situations where, you know, not in this district, but we didn't implement a cash reserve for years and years and years. And there comes a time when, you know, June 30th hits and we still have bills to pay for July and August for the last fiscal year. And if you don't have the cash, you have to borrow it, short-term borrowing. Doesn't mean we're not breaking any laws because, you know, we have the authority to spend it, but we just don't have the cash. And then that creates more interest and more, you know, more headaches, I guess, to have to go through that. I think,
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
I can see where districts can get into, I want to use the term trouble, when they go way in the negative
Yeah.
area.
for spending
But,
authority.
yeah, but is there any kind of rule or laws that prevent districts to be at that maximum? I mean, because to me, it looks like a saving account, a big saving account.
Are you talking
for
about the
schools.
spending authority?
Yes.
Yeah. There's no maximum percentage or anything. You just can't, you can't spend more than what authority you have
Yes.
generated. Yeah. To my knowledge, there is no maximum amount. that's why kind of ISB puts out, here's your recommended range to be in for a healthy district. And obviously they're very healthy. I don't, again, I don't, it's not against the rules or anything, so. All right, slide number 18. All right, those guys in the back are still awake, good. So, I just wanted to review just those levies and when they expire. That instructional support levy and the voter approved, the voters approved the instructional support levy on 9/11/2012 that started July 1st of 2013 and went through June 30th of 2023. Our board approved extending that ISL not too long ago, it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago. And we did a 5-year board approved. And so that basically extended it from the expiration originally of 23 to now 2028. So that's when the board approved instructional support levy expires. Then there's the physical plant and equipment levy, the voter approved levy. The voters approved on 9/13/2016, the levy starting July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2030. So that's when those two big levies expire. And then there's this revenue purpose statement, and I've talked to the facilities committee about the revenue purpose statement. And what that means, or I don't know if you all know that to spend the statewide sales tax money, every district had to have a revenue purpose statement. For Muscatine, the revenue purpose statement means basically this, we can spend the same things on sales tax revenue that we can for capital projects. So that revenue purpose statement, in 2019, the legislature, obviously, extended the statewide penny to go to 2051. Our current revenue purpose statement was approved September 13th of 2016, before the 2019 law change, and it will expire January 1st of 2031. So eventually, we will need to put on our ballot renewing that revenue purpose statement so that it goes to the length of time that the penny goes to, of 2051. If we don't, the sales tax after 2031 would need to be used to abate any debt service levy. Well, our district does not have a debt service levy at this time. It needs to abate any voter-approved levy. So we do have a voter-approved levy. We would have to use sales tax revenue to abate that dollar. So we basically would remove that $1.34 PEPL. And then anything after 1 and 2, or like the last two things, then we can use for capital projects. So just kind of putting that in the back of your mind here, and obviously I will bring it up again next year, something to consider maybe for a school board election. The next time there's a school board election, to put this revenue purpose statement on there. I mean, you could have a special election if you needed to. Right now, there's no, if the school board ever wanted to sell revenue bonds, you could only borrow against those sales tax revenues through 2031, or through January of, I believe, 2031. You couldn't borrow for the next 20 years. So that's what that would be indicating if you did that before. And then, something to consider on the next school board election, unless we needed to sooner than that, we'd have to have a special election, but those obviously cost money to have. So.
And if I've got it correctly, when it was approved by voters on 2012, that then allowed it to start 2013.
Yep, that was
And
the instructional support levy.
Time, that's when our financial indicator was like at 9.9, and then we started to be
Right.
able to,
That instructional support levy helped Muscatine schools tremendously when that implemented. Because it wasn't like you said you were going to go out and increase your expenditures by the amount of that. The ballot language for the instructional support levy is for any general purpose or any general fund expenditure. Doesn't say that it has to be something specific.
so with that in mind, then, it being that's ending on 2028, we would have to have that done by the election period
Well,
on the 2027.
you're talking about the board approved instructional support levy. So,
Or the voter approved, yeah.
oh, okay, so the voter approved levy will expire 2023, but then the school board did a 5-year extension of that
Oh.
levy.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, and so at some point between now and maybe 2027, we'll talk
Right.
about renewing that another 5 years.
And I think the wise thing not to wait even to
Right,
2027, because what
We won't-
if the
yeah.
voters decided
yeah.
to vote against it? So
I mean,
that doesn't give you any time to move
Right.
after that. So it's something
Yep.
way before it should be.
Thank you.
all right. And again, on next Monday, board meeting, we'll have a couple agenda items related to the budget, and then April 11th will be our public hearing, and the night we'll certify. So, and again, reach out to me. I'm happy to meet with you individually if you have questions about any finance-related topic or whatever, so.
Thank
very
you,
much.
Tom, for this
Yeah.
amazing report, I would say. Thank
No
you.
problem.
And next is Mr. Ryan Castle.
All right, so I'm gonna try to make this as fast as I can for you guys. There's quite a bit of information up here today, but some of it you've heard before. I'm just kind of updating on you on where we're at. So just to kind of give you guys an idea, so we have a facility committee that we started meeting in the fall with. A couple meetings in the fall. We just met last week, and just to kind of give you guys an update of who these people are, where we got them from. We tried to get a cross section of the community. We have business members, we have parents, we have school board members, administrators, district administrators, principals, to kind of get as well-rounded of a group looking at our facilities as we could. So like I said, we met on the 23rd of last week, and then we're meeting again on March 23rd. March 23rd, we should have some more information on some of the information that we need as far as capacity studies, things like that. So what this committee is about is basically we're developing options for moving our facilities forward, updating our facilities, continuing to push forward so that we are providing the best environment for our students. As we look at our goals, purposes, and goals, evaluating our current facilities, our current completed projects, to kind of give us a baseline of where we're at, and then looking at our future needs, creating that long-term plan so that we can move the district forward over the next 5 to 10 years. Additionally, we have to make sure that we're taking that budget that Tom just spent, that time talking to you guys about, current operational costs and those other funding options that we have to be able to keep the district in good financial health as we improve our facilities. Additionally, just get some additional input from stakeholders throughout the community by talking to parents, by talking to business leaders in the community. Oops, I apologize. So in looking at that, we're looking at learning spaces. We're looking at a secure environment for our students. We're looking at our building conditions. And I will say our building, as far as overall health, our buildings are in good shape. We don't have anything crumbling from underneath us. We obviously have things that we need to do to continue to keep our buildings in operational shape. We have some roof things. We have HVAC things that we're doing. But if you're looking at the bones of our buildings are in good shape. Additionally, looking at, that enrollment changes. Right now we have RSP who did the study for us last year. as far as our enrollment analysis that you guys saw as a board last year. We're having them look at the capacity of our buildings and future enrollment trends to see how that capacity will impact the district as we move forward over the next few years. You know, we want to make sure that any construction we do is a permanent construction. We don't want anything temporarily, and anything that is temporary, we want to be able to phase out. Additionally, we want to make sure that the work that we do is spread across our district. We don't want to focus on one building or one area of town and neglect other areas of town. And then looking for partnerships and how we can move the district forward. So the first thing that I want to share with you guys tonight is the centralized kitchen. So centralized kitchen, you know, we had some issues with our first site. Clint and I and Karen have been in talking with the Ag Center about 2 potential sites on that property for the centralized kitchen. So if you look at the picture I have here, what I have outlined in red are 2 potential sites, each approximately 2 acres in size. So the Ag Center sits on just under 73 acres of land, just on the edge of town. So what we are looking at is 2 2-acre sites on the Ag Center land that could be potential building areas for us. Now, the building itself won't take the entire 2 acres, but we also have to consider parking and turnaround for semis and, you know, being a good neighbor as well. As we look at these sites, there's one major consideration is our sewer and water costs. If you look at the site, you see the rendezvous parking lot, and next to that, the street next to that is Westfield Lane, I believe. So that is where the sewer main stops for the city. Sewer is very expensive to put in. So as we look at those 2 considerations, the site closer to the bypass is going to be significantly more expensive for us to do because of sewer and water lines. The site closer, obviously, we wouldn't have that additional cost. But so as we look at the meeting with the Ag Learning Board, Friends of the FFA, MCC, which we have, you know, there's a unique group there, and to work at determining which of these sites, if any, are feasible for us to move forward. We have a certain amount set aside for this project. We don't have the extra to put in another $1 million for sewer and water. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions on this?
It's already zoned correctly.
So it's zoned agricultural right now, but I've already been in contact with the city, and we'd just have to get a variance, and they don't see a problem with that moving forward.
Just from conversations with the folks on the Ag Center board, as you can see, the property there on the right side of the picture kind of takes up part of that space where they will grow some crops on there. And the other piece is in a pasture that hasn't been used for several years. So their preference would be that other pasture area. But that other pasture area is where we have to run sewer to, right? So, you know, as we work through the process of coming to agreement on that, I think that property kind of on the right side there has a little more value to them because they get crop income from it currently. So what we have to do is kind of estimate what those costs would be in both directions. If we ended up doing that property on the left, and we had to add the sewer cost connections in there, what that would look like versus, you know, what it would look like here, and kind of work through the process with them. One of the things we have talked about, and again, I think they've been very open and supportive to this conversation, and we all want to work together to get this done, is, you know, at some point we're gonna have to purchase this land, these 2 acres, because it's like owning property with siblings, right? At some point, if you want a piece of it just for you, it gets really tricky to try to, like, who's where and which portions are mine. So we'll just identify what that space is. We'll, you know, there'll be an offer to purchase that particular 2 acres, and then that will be district property. So, and I think the Ag Board was all more comfortable with doing that than trying to find a lease agreement or, some other options.
Yeah, I
Yes,
would agree.
because one of the things too that they talked about was, well, what if you guys suddenly don't want the building there? And we had to explain to them, just as Ryan had indicated, we're looking for permanency. And so once they understood that, that kind of helped us to, drive the conversation closer to the idea of us purchasing.
No, I do feel comfortable moving forward, like with this. I think we're in a good working spot, and obviously I'd love to hurry this along as much as we possibly can to get this project started. But I also understand the steps that need to go into this. So, and just to get,
The
go ahead.
rush does it have to be done by a certain time, or what's the rush?
So we
Because of Central?
we can't get out of Central until this is done. So that would be my rush. I'm concerned about getting out of Central as quickly as we can.
What does it cost us to stay in Central? Okay.
We'll get that number.
But Ken, to your point, we are heating and cooling that building to some degree, not what we would to, normal,
Correct.
but there's still costs that are going into that building that's unoccupied, except for, again, some usage of the auditorium and the gym.
So just to give you guys an idea, the floor plan really hasn't changed a whole lot. If you look at it, it's approximately 7,200 square feet of building space. Includes walk-in freezers and refrigerators, hot and cold production areas, dry storage, and a bakery, which just enables us to do a lot of things, in-house that we can't do. For example, we sent out an RFP for pizza slices for the high school. We sent it out to 12 vendors. We had 1 back. So we see that trend. We saw that trend with our baked goods last year. And that's a trend that starts to worry us a little bit as we move forward. We want to make sure that we can provide our own in-house items versus going out for vendors and getting very few responses back. The next thing on the docket for tonight is just HVAC, which comes out of our ESSER money. So we have to expend it and then we get it reallocated to us. So the first one, just to kind of give you guys that reminder. So you guys approved $4.5 million from ESSER for HVAC improvements last year. The original bids that we sent out came back much higher than anticipated for various reasons. And then last meeting, you guys approved the student center, which included the high school HVAC in it. So to kind of give you an idea of where we're at. So high school was one of our top priorities as a district from our HVAC staff that needed to be done. So as you break apart the student center and HVAC at the high school, approximately $1.273 million of that was dedicated to HVAC at the high school. So that includes the industrial tech area, the pool, which has no humidity control right now, fitness rooms, wrestling rooms. So that includes all of that as a part of that student center, as well as the student center itself, which has to be redone because of changing the layout of that area. Okay. The next 2 priorities for us are Clark and Grant Elementary School. So I hesitate to put out exact numbers, but what we came back from with the last bids, if we break those down by buildings, Clark is about $2.4 million of HVAC improvements, and Grant is close to $500,000 of HVAC improvements that need to be done. So what we'll do is we're going to rebid those starting tomorrow. That will come back in 2 weeks, and then we'll bring it to the board in our April meeting to be approved. That brings us to about $4.2 million in HVAC expenditures, and then we have to add architect fees on top of that. So that should get us really close to that $4.5 million mark that you guys approved.
Do you see that when you actually rebid, that they realize that, hey, we were a little high and that they need to go lower? You know what I'm saying?
I would say no, and the reason that they don't need work right now. There's work everywhere for these contractors. We only had 2 bids last time for HVAC in particular. So, and as we look at, so one of those bid packages last week, and I'm not going to say names, but just equipment alone and controls from Friday to Monday went $600,000 over the weekend. That cost rolls right to us. So as we continue to go down the lines, I don't see these prices going down. Not anytime soon, anyways. I think they will stabilize at some point in time, but not in the near future.
Ryan, couple points here. Number one, what is the guarantee that they come back with a lower bid than before? Number two, can we expand that area of bids and perhaps find those companies and contractors that will give us much lower bids?
So,
Ryan, maybe let me jump in here. I don't think we're going to get lower bids. I think so basically what we know now, high increase in cost, high increase in labor. So what we've had to do, and that was the reason, we asked the board to reject those bids outside of the high school so we can go back and reprioritize. The highest priority is Susan Clark. In our initial estimate, we were thinking that was a $600,000 to $800,000 expenditure. When you really dig into it and dig into what it needs right now, it's at that 2.4 million, right? So instead of doing all of the buildings, right now we can do the high school, we can do the middle or the junior high, and we can do Grant. The other buildings still have to get done, but they're going to have to come out of that Pebble and Save fund that we were just talking about with Tom. So we just have to reprioritize, and those are going to have to be smaller projects moving forward. But the highest need right now are the high school, Clark, and Grant, right? So now we know, since we can't spend any more of those ESSER funds than we've already allocated, we'll spend those up, and then we'll reprioritize and do the other projects as we move forward. That's part of what that facility committee is looking at. What are our priorities in terms of that long-term facility maintenance component?
Susan Clark and Grant have both had expansions over the last couple of years, maybe 10 years ago. You replacing everything at those schools or just certain sections that need to be replaced?
so the last expansion at Susan Clark was done in 2004.
Okay.
So even those units are 16 years old. So what we've done, and actually the 1988 edition of Clark, we've already bought for that section. So what we're looking at is what was replaced in the 70s, basically, in that front of the building, and then some of that 2004 edition as well. So most of the time we're looking at about a 20-year lifespan for these. We are well past some of our life expectancies on some of the stuff at Clark. That's why it's one of our priorities. Right now there's rooftop units and classroom ventilators at Clark we can't get parts for. So if one of those would go down, we would have no way to replace that right now. And the same thing is at Grant. Our rooftop units at Grant, we can't buy parts for. We can't service them if something would happen to them. All of our other buildings right now, we can at least buy parts for and service if something would happen. So that's why those are our top 2 priorities.
So one of the other pieces that we're looking at in terms of these projects and the other HVAC projects moving forward is we also know that when you replace HVAC equipment that's 20, 30, 40 years old, you're going to get more efficient equipment that's running. So what are some of the cost savings that we should be seeing, what we might anticipate seeing moving forward? Again, as an example for Susan Clark, I was in an office there at the junior high last week, and the univent there, it blows all the time, 100% of the time. It's either blowing really hot air or really cold air. There's no in between. It just switches from really hot air to really cold air. So you're either super hot or you're super cold, and that's happening kind of throughout the building, right? So how do we modulate that and make sure we replace that equipment? So again, we should also see as a part of these projects some reduction in operational costs, but we don't have those numbers yet. That's another piece that we're going to be taking a look at.
Student Center, just want to give you guys a brief overview of that. So we finalized that last month with the acceptance of the bid. So as we're looking at this, the Student Center includes that new student services area with built-in therapy rooms there, the actual Student Center itself with 5 conference rooms off of it, and then the new nurses area as well, which with triage rooms, more beds, more bathrooms inside, a better ability to serve those kids at the high school. Right now, we're working on combining the furniture proposals from the student groups that have been working with HNI, and we'll be bringing that to you guys soon as well. That is all I have for you guys tonight, unless you guys have any questions.
Any question for Ryan?
So just, again, to kind of finalize this piece too, what the facility committee, what we're kind of working on is what is our long-term plan for facility maintenance, right? So that's kind of an ongoing yearly cost of projects that are going to have to be done. We've had our architect firm do that study. You obtained those materials last year. And again, if you want the binder, it's about this thick, full of information there. The main priority 1s and 2s, the really important pieces, that's the HVAC work. Those are roofs. That's building envelope types of windows, brickwork. There's a lot of pavement work involved in that. So again, prioritizing what needs to happen first. Again, very helpful that we have ESSER dollars to help offset some of those HVAC costs. Then also looking just more long-term. If you, again, as we looked at kind of what the goal of that group is and what our priorities are, one of the main priorities is quality learning spaces and safe and effective learning environments, right? So we know at some point we're going to have to invest in our facilities. A number of them were built in the 50s. And so we're going to need to do something. We've done quite a bit of work to the high school over the last several years. Probably that next big priority will be Susan Clark. It needs some work, and all of our students filter through Susan Clark in the high school. We also need to take care of our elementaries and make sure, do we have safe environments? Do we have, our entrances in some of our buildings don't have the same kind of level of security as others, just the way the building layout is. So that's where we're looking at those enrollment studies to say, based on enrollment, long-term, what buildings, are going to need those updates, and what options do we have? Coming back then to the board with some of those options that we'll develop. Then after we present those to the board, we get those out to the public and get the public feedback, on that, and then we come back. And that's where, especially when we start looking at, we can do small projects here and there every couple of years, every other year. But at some point, can we take advantage of some of those sales tax dollars and do maybe a larger project? But again, that's where Tom talked about that revenue purpose statement that would have to be renewed. We know from the state law that was passed, those funds will continue through 2050 or 2051. So by updating that revenue purpose statement, it gives us a longer runway to borrow on some of those funds that doesn't impact our taxpayers here in the way, like we wouldn't have to levy to increase taxes to offset that, because we would be paying with those other dollars and still having some of those Pebble funds to still do the facility maintenance pieces that need to be done. So again, it's looking at all those pieces, putting that together, putting some options together, and getting that back in front of the board and then in front of the community. So that's the work coming up.
Because right now your borrowing can only go to 2031, but if you had it extended to 51, you can go an additional 20 years of borrowing.
Correct.
So it'd be good to put this story together for Susan Clark and propose that to the stakeholders, the community, to buy into that extension.
Yep.
It's not really additional tax, just extending what you're already paying.
Correct.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Moving forward with the superintendent updates.
All right, got a few things for you here tonight. So first thing, we talked at our last meeting about the overload pay program. At that point, it was targeted for all of our staff except for building administrators and district directors. And the board asked, go back, kind of take a look at that again, and maybe make some considerations for administration. So, and working through this with directors, we would update the proposal to include building administrators. And then we'll continue to keep directors out of that. Not that they haven't done a great job, because they all have. I appreciate their work. But it's just harder to do something different with building administrators, because some of the things you can do, add additional carryover days, or you do add some extra vacation days. But as a building administrator, it's hard to be gone from your building ever. And so by adding additional vacation days or adding additional carryover days, it just perpetuates the problem of they can't really use them anyway. So in having that discussion, and they have done a great job through this as well. They're covering classrooms, they're subbing in classrooms, and so we felt that would be an important change to that proposal. So that adds just the building administrators into that mix, but again, continues to exclude our directors and that high-level district administration.
And Clint, I think you and me had that discussion, and I think, if I remember right, correct me please, I think we're only talking about 7 people here. And I think Mike and other board members during the meeting spoke about moving forward with this for everybody, including directors, because this is what we say, thank you, and we appreciate what you have been doing in the past 2 years. So I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole board, but really I think we should consider those 7 directors as part of that when that action item comes to us next month for the board meeting. But this is again my opinion. It's open for discussion too for other board members. But the idea is to say thank you for the great work that everybody, district-wide, directors, all the way to everyone, did in the past 2 years. So.
And I think if I remember correctly, you indicated something about you were clarifying a little better what was those groupings of where they actually were able to get the monies, the amount of monies or something. Because I think on our original information we had, it just basically said something like 40-hour people, 30-hour people. But instead, it's a little bit more clarified what that means and who gets into the categories.
That's everybody. I think there were questions that it wasn't just for teachers, it's for all staff. It's for our nutrition services staff, our bus drivers included, even any of our subs are in there. And again, I think it's appropriate to include building administrators, and not that it's inappropriate to include district directors, but it's easier to be flexible with these 7 people at the district office and say thank you in different ways than with these dollars. So that's why my recommendation and that updated proposal right now would just include building administrators.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that? Okay, so kind of aligned to that I just want to provide some clarification on. There's been some media coverage on the governor's teacher retention pay. So the governor also has ESSER funds that she can use directly. That's how we were able to provide some technology early on in the pandemic. So there's been some questions on what that looks like. It is $1,000 per teacher, but I would say there's some work we have to do on our end, because there's some caveats to that. They have to be teachers that are 100% in front of students all of the time. So again, that does not include our media library specialists, does not include counselors, does not include any of our instructional coaches or instructional support specialists. So We have to go through and identify, who those teachers are. We also have to get to them an assurance that they're going to continue on through the rest of the year. So that has to be, we have to collect all that information before that can be turned around and be paid. We're also working with the association to communicate, so we'll send out to staff, essentially to all teachers, that yes, this is happening, and but it's not for all, and we'll kind of put out what the specifics are of that, and if you're going to receive it, you'll get this additional email. And again, we don't have any control over those funds necessarily or how they're allocated. But we'll just have to implement based on the guidance we're receiving. And I would say there are not quite daily webinars, but pretty frequent webinars that people have been sitting through to make sure we understand what that guidance is, so we can get the appropriate people paid at the appropriate time.
So Clint, though I'm appreciative of the gesture, I think that's exactly what it is, a gesture, because what I'm hearing, or what I'm reading, both, is that we're going to give money to some people that follow the rules we want. That's my opinion. But we're not going to give it to other people. And then the retention side of it is that we're going to be thankful that they stay. They're going to get the money in March, and we're going to be thankful that they stay in April and May. And then they might, what we really want to, if we're going to retain people, and what I'm worried about is staffing next year. I am really, really, truly worried about staffing next year. So why can't we offer money to teachers to say, hey, if you sign your contract and you're going to be here, that's when the $1,000 would be nice. That's my personal opinion of this, but I'm thankful for the work you do, and the directors do. I know that you guys are put in a situation again where it's the time constraints on it, or it seemed silly. We're going to try to get something done by March. That's tomorrow. Sorry, but we get this information. I'm frustrated. So go ahead. I have others to go on that'll let me do even more.
If there's other questions related to that governor's incentive pay, happy to answer those. Also can have Jamie come up and answer any of those questions if you have them as well.
Because what you're indicating is that is separate.
That is
From
totally separate from
our-
what we're doing,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Ours, again, is for everybody, and prorated based on the amount of hours you work. This was always going to be geared to teachers only, but again, now that we have additional information, there's specific groups and qualifications for that. So we're going to try to work through those logistics, and again, try to communicate to staff, both, I'm sure, those who are getting it and also those who aren't. Again, that's coming from the state, and we'll do our best to implement that appropriately. The other, another piece I want to update you on is just Covet update. Obviously, conditions are going really well. So as of this week, we are kind of below 5% of absences related to COVID, which is the lowest we've been all year. So that's a really positive sign. We have 2 total cases right now, staff and students across the district. And our attendance, again, is looking better. Staff attendance is looking better. So I know they're feeling that in the building, just having more staff on hand. Also, CDC updated their guidelines. So the only place we were requiring masks was on the bus, because there was still the federal requirement for public transportation. So that goes away based on this new guidance. So I've talked with Ryan Castle, making sure we turn that off on the buses as well. So all things looking really positive there, and we hope that continues. So then the last piece for you, you've got a little packet here. Again, just a number of items that are still kind of in the legislative funnel. Obviously we've gotten the supplemental state aid piece at 2.5%, but it's important to continue to advocate for our district and for students across the state. So The first page is just kind of the Omnibus Bill from the governor that contains a number of items, right? And just some information on some of those items. And again, a lot of the pieces that are in here, we have pieces in place for them already in terms of book removals and transparencies, and our teaching and learning departments is working with staff right now to develop a curriculum website that would have a lot of that information posted as it relates to any of these transparency pieces. So again, I think we are in a good spot on that. I might be missing a back page on mine. One of the pieces that I do want to talk just a little bit about in terms of your advocacy to our legislators is around vouchers, or the Student First Scholarship Program. And again, IASB, there's some talking points here. Get my copies here.
Clint, while you look for that, I apologize ahead of time for rattling to everybody else on the board and that are sitting out there. I know it's getting late and we've got a lot of information, but I'm going to rattle. So
Hang on, before you rattle, let me just, is it related? It's going to be related to this?
it is going to be related.
Yeah,
to
so let me just punch through some of these items and then
Yeah,
I'll
fine.
open it up to you guys. So these are IASB talking points that just kind of, again, talk through some of what I think are the key components of this in terms of how I perceive it from a public school standpoint. And again, for me, a lot of this is any time we fund education with public dollars, it should be for all kids. And there should be transparency, and whatever rules are required of us in public schools should be required to be followed by anyone who receives those public dollars. And so I think that's an important piece that's in these IASB talking points. There's, again, some language on the back there. Again, should you choose to talk to legislators, or even if you're talking to community members about, perceptions of this, there's some really good talking points, I think, in there. Also included is a map of the state of Iowa, and it's done by district. And what you see in the different colors there for you, if it's white in that district area, they have no non-public schools at all. So you can see a majority of the state does not have a non-public in that district area. You can see there are gray areas. Those gray areas have one. So if you look at Muscatine, we're in the gray. We do have one non-public here, okay?
Without a high school.
What's that?
Without a high school.
Yes. And then the ones in the orange, kind of varies from there, and the orange would have between 4 and 12. So again, it gives you a perspective of where these are. Part of this bill then would take that funding, and it would be put towards non-publics, and a portion of that would be pulled off and sent to the rural school districts, again, because you can see a majority of these don't have that option. And again, my concern on that is it really is we continue to perpetuate inequities that we already have, as you saw in some of our funding tonight. The other piece that I wanted to share with you, the last piece of that, is just the amount of money that the state is currently putting towards non-publics. And when you start to look at all of those pieces added up, both for non-public and for homeschool support, it totals about $64 million right now. What's being proposed is only for 10,000 students, and it's about $5,400 per student. That's $54 million. That would be $54 million added on top of this 64. And again, as we look at the 2.5%, we're very thankful for that 2.5%. But for us, that was a negative. We're down $19,000 from where we were. Obviously, what we should be advocating for is more of those dollars being put into public schools where we're required to have transparency. We have an elected board from the community. We accept all students, right? So again, I wanted to make sure you had those opportunities and that information. A lot of this comes out of IASB, which you have access to. There's good talking points and other pieces in the legislation, but right now I know, that's a big one that's being talked about, so I wanted to share that with you as a board tonight.
I appreciate your comments. I appreciate the fact that you're very political and have to say the nice things. I don't have to say as many nice things. So I've been part of education in Iowa, either as a student, a parent, an employee, for over 50 years. I've been in the Catholic school system as a principal. I've been in the public school system as a teacher and an administrator. I've been part of the homeschool as the teacher of record because all of my nieces and nephews homeschooled. The one thing I've always loved about Iowa is the fact that we understood for as long as I've been part of this, that all three aspects of whether it's homeschool, whether it's non-public school, whether it's public school, had to work together and had to support each other. And we're being told that this is all about school choice, and this is not about school choice, because we've had school choice. You talked about money. So when I was a Catholic school principal and trying to figure out how I was going to get a budget made, they started the STO, the student, student tuition organizations, right? That credit. So they give $20 million there's $20 million of public school credit or of tax dollars that are allotted, which generates over $30 million for non-public schools of tuition for kids that need assistance to go where where their parents want them to go. The amount of money that we throw, you look at homeschool, how we compare to the rest of the country, Iowa is extremely friendly homeschool wise. We have 5 different options. And if a parent just wants to say, I'm not going to send my kid to school because I'm going to keep them home and teach them myself, we don't ask questions, and that's the way it should be. We support parents as the primary educators of their kids day in and day out, and we have for the last 50 years that I've been part of this. And the fact that we're going to ask about your system, we just had Tom talk to us all night about, or not all night, sorry, Tom. He gave us 18 great pages of how we're spending our money, where our money's going, where those tax dollars that this community generates, where are they going and how are they being spent? That will not happen with the voucher system because there's not the same level of accountability. Clint, you're exactly right. There's not that level of accountability. The other part of it that's not going to be there, and I can tell you this right now, as Tom was telling us, here's the ESSER dollars, and we have to hold back 20% of those for all of the kids that are falling behind. That same requirement's not going to be held at the non-public schools. They can spend their money however they want. They don't have to test. They get to do what they want. I was part of that. What I can tell you is, as Catholic school principal, we never, ever turned away a kid that wanted to be, or a family that wanted to be there. If they needed tuition assistance, we figured out how to get it. Those systems are built on time, treasure, and talent. If you don't have the treasure, if you don't have the money, you can help with treasure or with talent or time. We had people that would come in and help clean at night or paint during the summer. Student choice, parent choice is there right now. And for this, the way I see this, again, is another attack on public school systems. You can be nice and say you're thankful for the 2.5%. I'm not going to be so nice. I think it's ridiculous. There are 357 school districts in the state of Iowa. 82 of them are in the same place that we are, budget authority. That means that we're going to get less money or equal money than we got last year. And with the fact that we had inflation and everything else, we are losing ground. Our kids are losing ground. They're talking about a $5. We're talking about the increase for the transportation. We're going to get an extra $5, and we're supposed to be thankful for that. The fact is, and I don't mean to throw Pleasant Valley under the bus, but I just know that if we had the same number of kids that they have, and we were pretty close, but they get almost $500,000 more dollars to $1 million more dollars every year because of where their kids live. That's not fair. And it has to be addressed that way. We're sitting on $1 billion as a state, and you're going to throw me $150 million, $156 million for the 480,000 public school kids. That's what it is. $159 million is 2.5%. And then you're going to turn around and say, oh, but we're going to give $54 million to these 10,000 kids. That's not logical. So you can be thankful. What I would really like, and I would hope that our board would consider, is to write a statement for the next board meeting or at the next board meeting that we have a statement saying as a board that we do not support this voucher system. That's what I would like to see happen at the next one. I would hope that we'd be able to put that on the agenda, and that it might fall to deaf ears. I've asked for our representatives to contact me. They're in my phone. They'll call me and ask me for favors, but they won't talk to me about anything else. So it might fall on deaf ears, but at least I would feel more comfortable with the fact that we stood up and said, look, this is not right. This is not helping the kids of Muscatine. So I told you I was going to rant. I've ranted.
Thank you, Mike. I think words comes from the heart. So I think I can summarize everything that we are seeing and saying as in one statement. Public dollars needs to be for public education, period. I mean, that is the statement that we have to stick to. We represent the public education as a school of Board of Education. So yes, I do agree also that it is our job to connect with our representatives, our senators, to show up perhaps this coming Saturday at the legislation session and talk about it in front of everybody. So thank you. Anybody else would like to add to this?
I have a brief statement that has not with these talking points, but I do understand that one of the points that are made for some of the private schools is that how much more they'll get on their education and where they're at with their math and reading skills. I know from some personal knowledge of a private school that I just recently looked at those numbers, and our percentage of how our kids are doing in the math area is almost 10% higher. That was just one school, of course, that I was utilizing with that. But I think it is worthwhile to make sure that the general public and everybody understands what are some of these type of issues, whether we do it at privately, with individuals, going to at Saturday or any other way, to make sure that everybody understands that this is hard. This is hard for everybody.
Thank you, Karen. Anybody else?
John, I left one piece out. As a parent, one of the things I can tell you, I sent my kids to a Catholic school, K6 or K5, because I wanted them to have a Catholic education at that time. That was a choice I had. Everybody still has that choice. Regardless of what happens with this, everybody still has that choice. So.
Thank you. Okay, moving forward, the next item on our agenda is second
John,
read.
just one piece for
I'm
clarity here. When I looked at my one packet on this IASB, on the backside, the one packet I had was blank. Is yours blank or is there?
Mine's blank.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, I don't think it copied correctly. I'll make another copy and I'll send that out electronically so you guys have both sides, because a lot of that information that I was talking about is on the back here, and it didn't copy over, so I will fix that and get that out to you. My apologies.
Thank you, Clint. Okay, our next item on our agenda is second reading on policies 501.3, entrance requirement, 501.11, dual enrollment, 501.12, student transfer in, 504.3, initiations, and it's suggested to be deleted, 505.3, student injury illness at school. Any question about any of those policies?
The initiations, why the deletion of it? Is it covered
So-
somewhere else?
Yeah, it's covered
reminder.
in other policies.
Great.
It's in the bullying and harassment policy.
Okay.
And just this, on the, sorry, the 505.3 looked like changing, the school district will attempt to notify a student's parent or guardian as soon as possible. Was it a one phone call, we stopped, we attempted to call you if your kid was injured? Or we're gonna continue to call you until we get a hold of you because your kid was injured? I would not want to be told if I was a parent, my kid got hurt at school, hey, we tried to call you once and you didn't
Right.
answer.
I would say that practice is they will continue to call. We do run into cases where cell numbers are not updated.
Yep.
And we run into that kind of wall. They will go down the list of contacts. They'll call every single contact on there. Sometimes those contacts don't even know they're on the contact list. So I think, again, the intent is to do everything we can to contact them. We just can't always guarantee they will, like, we're going to talk to them, but we'll do everything we can. I think that's the intent of the language.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Next item is announcement of upcoming meetings and events. March 7, School Board Community Conversation at 6 p.m. at the lower level of City Hall. Board Member Mike Morgan and Board Member Ken LaRue will be in attendance. March 7th, regular session 7 p.m. Obviously, it will be the first Monday instead of the traditional second Monday of each month, but that will be due to spring break. March 8th, the River Bend Food Pantry, 4:30 to 6 p.m. here at the Administration Center in the parking lot. March 7th through 11th, Parent-Teacher Conferences. March 10th, 2-hour early dismissal. March 11th, no school come day. March 14th to 18th, spring break. March 24th, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. is the kindergarten roundup at the administration centers. Any other announcement? Okay, the next item is we need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Nay? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.